what to make.
If you find yourself in need of legal representation, it can be a very stressful time in your life. In my career, I have dealt with thousands of lawyers, I've dealt with thousands of law firms, and I can confidently recommend to you Keith M. Davidson at kmdlaw.com. Available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Just log into kmdlaw.com. That's kmdlaw.com. Or you can call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. That's 833-4KMD-LAW. Personal injury, wrongful death, STDs, sexual assault, car accidents. They handle it all efficiently and professionally. It doesn't matter how imposing the opposition may be, because the team at kmdlaw.com are battle-tested and fierce. They will not stop until justice prevails. Go to kmdlaw.com or call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. If you're in for the fight of your life, stop screwing around and contact KMD Law. Silk City Hot Sauce. A small batch hot sauce prepared with farm-grown peppers. Rich and vibrant taste, no artificial ingredients, 100% pure goodness. 8 flavors from mild to wild. The sweet and spicy Mango Madness, the green jalapeno sauce called Aztec Attack. The Dragon features fire-roasted peppers and pure Vermont maple syrup. Killer hot sauces for the true hot sauce fanatic, a blend of ghost peppers, habanero peppers, honey, and garlic, and more. You gotta see the bottles too. Each flavor has original comic book artwork. You gotta see them. Go to silkcityhotsauce.com. silkcityhotsauce.com. Enter promo code ED, ED, to save 15%, and you'll also receive a free bottle of hot sauce.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
The Opperman Report is brought to you by aquadam.net. You can give them a call at 707-764-2119. A flooded home is never easy to deal with. You're left with the mess to clean up, the insurance companies to deal with, and not to mention all the memories, the precious memories that are lost in the flood. You can never replace those. And Aquadam can be a tool in your arsenal to protect your home and property from the floodwaters. The cofferdam is filled with water to control water and is reusable as long as it's taken care of. It can protect your home or business from rising floodwaters like a dam, but without the beavers. It can also be used in construction. If you need an area to be dewatered, an Aquadam can do the job. An Aquadam was used at SeaWorld in Orlando for the Mako roller coaster ride during the coaster's construction by dewatering the work area. An Aquadam is now dewatering the work area at San Antonio SeaWorld for their newest roller coaster ride. An Aquadam has been used in many construction projects all around the U.S. and all around the world. Now give Aquadam a call, 707-764-2119. You can look them up online at aquadam.net. You can find them on Facebook at Aquadam Inc. You call them up, you email them, you tell them Ed Opperman sent you, and they're going to take 10% off the price. Aquadam.net, 707-764-2119.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting through my website, emailrevealer.com, or you can just email me directly at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. If you like our show today, be sure and check out our Patreon. No, not our Patreon. Check out our archives at Spreaker.com. You go to Spreaker.com. You can sign up there for free. There's many, many more shows on there that you can find on YouTube. So if you're a dedicated YouTube listener, I encourage you to go over to Spreaker for free. And it's much easier to navigate. There's a chat room, and you get an email notification anytime we put up new content. And we've done many, many shows on there, as people know in the past, about Jeffrey Epstein. We have a new guest with us. He's a prolific Twitter contributor, and his Twitter name is Jimmy Falun Gong. And a lot of these guys on Twitter like to create these creative names. And Jimmy's come up with a new thread on here. His new thread on Twitter about some new information he's come up with Jeffrey Epstein's childhood. So, Mr. Falun Gong, are you there?
I sure am. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you, bro. So nice to meet you. So tell us about yourself. Who is Jimmy Falun Gong?
Yeah, so really, professionally, I come from a finance background. I don't really do conspiracy stuff professionally, but I do try to take a lot of the same principles of like, connections between people, and I try to take sort of a higher standard of evidence when I try to look at these things. So I found that's aided me in a lot of my own research just for my own benefit, and then sometimes I share it on Twitter. So
when you say you have a finance background, is that like a loan shark or a bookie, something like that?
I wish. Nothing quite so exciting.
All right. Okay, so you got this new thread here, and people should go to Jimmy. Then the next name is Falun, Falun and Gong. And he comes up with this and he says, well, I think I discovered a new angle on Epstein. And there's a whole thread here that Jimmy pretty much put together himself. So Jimmy, where do you want to get us started on this?
Yeah, and just right at the top, I want to give a shout out to a couple books that I pulled for a lot of this research. And a lot of this thread came out of a book I was reading by Peter Levenda called Sinister Forces Volume 3. Yeah, that guy. An interesting guy himself, right? So I was reading all of this crazy stuff in this Peter Levenda book, and I was like, oh, no, I need to fact check some of this. So I was going through and making sure that the things he was saying actually happened,
Yeah.
And I was finding even more evidence to support what he was saying about certain things. Now, he doesn't talk about Epstein at all. His book was mainly talking about the three people that I'm going to get into over the next hour. And specifically, we're talking about Jack Sarfati, Lee Harvey Oswald, and Whitley Strieber. Now, I think most of your listeners probably know Lee Harvey Oswald. And
wait,
probably a lot of them.
Let me stop you for a second there. Why don't you tell people who Peter Levenda is first, and how do you feel about his credibility and authenticness?
Well, I have all kinds of questions because, for one thing, he's in the Association of Former Intelligence Officers. He doesn't comment on how or why he is in that organization, but I think you can draw some conclusions about his background. He's a very weird dude. He's into a lot of high ritual magic. He literally knew people from the David Berkowitz scene. Like, he freaks me out a little bit. So I was reading his book because it's really good, but man, he knows so much stuff, and he's very suspect. So I was working on the back end trying to substantiate some of what he was saying, and I was finding that it was all substantiated and more so. So
Gotcha.
That's where this thread came from. So basically, yeah, we're looking at Jack Sarfati, who I was not quite as familiar with, but this guy, first and foremost, he's a physicist, and he's sort of a quantum physics popularizer. He's mainly known outside of academia, but he did work in academia. And he's also tied up in a lot of crazy stuff. But before we get too far into it, let's just talk about Epstein's early life, because we're going to be looking at Epstein and this Jack Sarfati guy. Okay? So I'm looking, and I found this article from the Daily Beast that went and interviewed a bunch of neighbors of Jeffrey Epstein in his early life in Coney Island, there in Brooklyn, New York City. So these neighbors called Epstein a genius. Now, granted, these are just neighbors in Coney Island, so a genius to them isn't necessarily like a real genius, but sure. It's consistent that they called him a math whiz, math nerd. So Epstein skipped the 3rd grade at his public school and was placed in a special program, which resulted in his then also skipping the 8th grade. So he's 2 years ahead. He goes to Lafayette High School there in Brooklyn, and he graduates 2 years early at the age of 16. So his neighbors talked about how he would tutor his friends and classmates in math, and they all said he was great at tutoring. So we can see that at least some of the work he was doing later at the Dalton School, which we'll get to that, he did seem to be good at tutoring from what everyone was saying. And Epstein was on a competitive math league, and he was supposed to be a talented piano player, and he attended the Interlochen summer camp there at some point, which is an interesting thing that we'll also get back to.
Now, how do we know for a fact he attended that summer camp?
Well, it's been reported in this Daily Beast article that I'm looking at.
Okay.
So I think that, and he of course later had a cabin there, and he donated a bunch of money to Interlaken and would say that he had attended. So I think it's pretty well substantiated that he went. And that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, later on, the school said that they, for fundraising purposes, they reached out to him and allowed people to use their facilities to they kind of like excused his behavior over there, saying, hey, it brought in a lot of money. It's very bizarre. There's some really weird quotes in that whole situation.
Very strange. So we will definitely get back to that.
Okay.
So that's, I think, the relevant part of Epstein's life. Now let's look at this Jack Sarfati guy. So, like I was saying, he's a popularizer of quantum mechanics. He has a PhD in physics. He is also known to people into high strangeness and weirdness. He's known as a physicist who's very interested in UFOs. And, a lot of academics don't like to be known publicly as into some of these stranger concepts. And Jack Sarfati is kind of a divisive figure in physics. He's sort of known as the kookier guy. And he also had a long-standing relationship with the Stanford Research Institute and some of those remote viewing programs, like we're talking Stargate and Uri Geller. He was tied up with Uri Geller.
Really?
And yes. In fact, I found an interview where he's sitting during the interview with Uri Geller's son for some reason, and Uri Geller's son is talking in the interview. It's very strange.
Because Geller openly admits he had connections to intelligence.
Correct.
Yeah.
So Jack Sarfati, in an interview, stops just short of saying he was recruited by the CIA. I have a quote here where he says, "I guess they called me an asset, and I did volunteer for the CIA. I was actually interviewed by the CIA at their office," unquote. I mean, they weren't pressing him. He just offers this information. Granted, he says a lot of incredibly strange things, so with everything Sarfati says, we're going to have to take it with a grain of salt. But I couldn't ever find an instance where he was actually seeming to lie. I mean, we'll get into it with this guy. So Jack Sarfati grew up in Flatbush in Brooklyn, which it's not right next to Coney Island, but it is in Brooklyn, right? And Jack Sarfati was 14 years older than Jeffrey Epstein, so they weren't the same age. But, as we'll see, they did seem to track in perhaps similar circles. So one thing here, Jack Sarfati was known as a boy genius. He seems to have been a genius in math and physics. Sort of a weird side note, Jack Sarfati was in the Civil Air Patrol when he was 14 there in Brooklyn, which is sort of a strange thing to be in general, and then also in Brooklyn. There's not exactly like a ton of, you wouldn't think that like, but I've seen pictures from his memoir of him flying in airplanes as a young boy. And of course, Lee Harvey Oswald, Chuck Rogers, David Ferry, and Barry Seal were all also in the Civil Air Patrol. Granted, that was in New Orleans. And at least in that instance, it has been speculated that David Ferry may have groomed Lee Harvey Oswald and some of the other boys in the Civil Air Patrol. All of this is circumstantial, but it's very strange, right?
There's definitely a pattern of these guys being in pilots. You know what I mean? Barry Seal, all these characters, they're always Bush. The whole Bush family are pilots, you know? There always seems to be a pattern with these guys being pilots.
Exactly. So, according to Jack Sarfati's memoir, which I have read, it's very strange, he actually depicts in these cartoons that he drew, he depicts that in 1953, he was 14 years old, and he got a telephone call from something that he called the God phone.
Hmm.
And he, as he describes it, it was a telephone call from a UFO. And the UFO said to him, quote, "I am a conscious computer on board a spacecraft. We have identified you as one of 400 young, bright, receptive minds. You must give us your decision now. If you say yes, you will begin to link up with the others in 20 years, unquote. Jack Sarfati said yes. And after having gone through college, he gets into some, like, a very weird career with Stargate, Stanford Research Institute. He knew Dr. Leary, all these strange people. Like, as I was researching this guy, Sarfati, I felt like, like when you're in the woods and you lift up a log and there's just all these, like, beetles and worms underneath, and it's just crazy stuff.
What was his association with Timothy Leary?
I think they just knew each other because Sarfati would basically, I think he was teaching, I forget which, I want to say I think it was the West Coast. And let's see here. And he was known to basically hang out at a cafe that was sort of like a famous circle of weird, people. And he actually tells, this is sort of unrelated, but he actually tells in his memoir that Timothy Leary told him that Timothy Leary was actually the illegitimate son of General MacArthur.
Oh, really?
And by all accounts, his dad was the dentist of General MacArthur at some point. So the connection is not completely, impossible. It's very strange. Anyway, let's see. Yes. So Sarfati was a professor at San Diego University in his adult life. So, in an interview, Sarfati was asked about the God phone, and he said, quote, "It's one of two things. Either it was what it said it was, or it was a government program. Take your choice. I mean, given everything else, it sounds like a government program. They're playing psychological games on these kids, quite possibly, so that's the most likely explanation," unquote. So here he is in an interview saying, that wasn't a UFO, that was government people calling and messing with me, and that they're doing it to other kids.
Yeah, probably because he's familiar with other similar projects.
I would absolutely believe it.
Yeah.
So, after this weird God phone incident, Jack Sarfati was recruited by another child, a child musical prodigy who ends up going to Juilliard. This other kid brings him into a after-school program that Sarfati calls the Merlin's Super Kids, which was an after-school group of gifted kids. And by all accounts, many of these kids he was hanging out with did end up with successful careers in academia. Like, these seem to have been genuinely very brilliant kids. Let's see, and of course, Epstein was also a musical child. So there's sort of a circumstantial connection there in Sarfati being recruited by a child's music prodigy, and Epstein being I wouldn't say a music prodigy, but by all accounts he was a talented pianist as a kid. So the interesting thing about this after-school group is that it met in the apartment of a man called Walter Breen. So we're going to have to slow down here and look at Walter Breen for a minute, okay?
Okay.
So Walter Breen was, by all accounts, one of the most important experts in coins, and he wrote, for people who look up the price of a rare coin, they go check some big book that has all of the weird defective coins and what their values are. Walter Breen was one of the guys who wrote one of those books. He was, by all accounts, an expert at it. He was also a science fiction author. Sort of weirdly, he may have been the first U.S. member of Mensa, And he also was a founding member of NAMBLA, the National Man-Boy Love Association. So Walter Breen was convicted of child molestation in 1954. So as of the point that he would be running the after-school program, he was already, in fact, a known convicted pedophile.
Just imagine too, if he's the go-to, if he's the Kelly Blue Book of coins, right? Yes. he can manipulate currency manipulation. That's a hugely powerful position.
And it's like also, I mean, we probably a lot of your listeners, and I'm sure you know that art speculation is basically just money laundering. Rare coins can play a similar role.
Exactly.
So Jack Sarfati said, quote, Breen was funded by his coin dealing, but also by one of the 4 founders of Texas Instruments, a man with OSS connections, unquote. He doesn't say the name of the which of the 4 founders of Texas Instruments, but he does say that, which is very interesting. So Walter Breen in New York City was closely involved with the Ayn Rand crowd. Now, there were a lot of interesting public intellectuals involved with Ayn Rand at that time in New York City in the 50s. One of them was Robert Anton Wilson, which is just interesting for me, knowing that he was floating around that same circle. Of course, famously also, there's Alan Greenspan, the economist. These are some of the people that were floating around Ayn Rand at the time. So it's sort of unrelated, but it's just another weird thing. Sarfati says that Walter Breen believed himself to have been the Charles Lindbergh baby. I'm not advocating this, but their ages do line up, right? Really weird. And so Sarfati described everyone in this circle, the after-school group, Walter Breen. He describes them as all, quote, extremely far right, politically speaking, which is just weird and interesting. And so this Walter Breen guy was married to a lady called Marion Zimmer Bradley, who was a popular fantasy author. I've seen her books in, libraries and bookstores. And she was herself an accused child abuser. And what's really even weirder than that is that Walter Breen and Marion Zimmer Bradley were both wandering bishops. So I'm
from that same group that the Process Church and the JFK assassins were all in.
Yeah. So Walter Breen and Marion Zimmer Bradley were both bishops ordained in the American Eastern Orthodox Church, and they were ordained by Bishop Michael Aitken, meaning that they do have the same line of apostolic succession as David Ferry of the JFK situation. So I'm pretty sure you know all about the wandering bishops, but I don't know if all of your listeners are going to know, since it's a pretty esoteric topic. But just for the record, just for the record, wandering bishops, also known as escopai vagantes, they have a long history going back centuries. But essentially, it's people who either invent their own church and name themselves bishops, or more often they will join a church for money and get ordained as bishops, even though there's in any one of these given churches, there's really not a congregation. So in the words of Peter Levenda, these are people who are janitors, criminals, or the borderline insane, and often also intelligence agents.
Yeah, and the story is that somehow Levenda stumbled on this group because he just happened to live next door to them and became curious.
That's the story.
Yeah, that's but it's possible.
Right. And so it doesn't really tie into anything. That's why a lot of JFK researchers don't necessarily go down this path, because it doesn't seem to lead anywhere, except that there's these weird fascist intelligence agents who like to trade fake priesthoods among each other. For what purpose? I don't know. It doesn't make sense, but they do it, and it's out there. I don't know. And here this Walter Breen guy and his wife are also wandering bishops. Just weird, right?
Yeah, and also there's also an above average number of homosexuals involved in the JFK assassination crew. You know, that there's more than average. You know, just Ferry, Doug Caddy, the General Walker. You know, founded a men's room. You know, you know. Like,
yeah, I mean,
like one after another. Even
David Ferry. Yeah.
What's his name? You know, the guy with the nightclub owner.
Yeah, like David Ferry was played by Joe Pesci in the JFK movie. He had alopecia. He was just a crazy dude. And he, by all accounts, he was a pedophile.
Yeah.
And he was in a group with Lee Harvey Oswald when Lee Harvey Oswald was of the age that he would be that David Ferry would be interested in him. It's just, these connections don't go anywhere, but they're just insane. So, basically, let's bring it back to Jack Sarfati, okay? So, Jack Sarfati said that Walter Breen was working with the Sandia National Laboratories, which is a Lockheed Martin subsidiary and was a key company involved in the Manhattan Project. And subsequently, they do a lot of nuclear and defense industry work. The company is still around, and it does work in, quote, computational biology, advanced mathematics, and cognitive science initiatives. So, Sarfati describes times, this is in his memoirs, he describes times when men from the Sandia Corporation came to lecture the boys on patriotism and anti-communism, and then take them to dinner in New York's Germantown. So, giving a lecture to a, after-school group seems fine, but then it sounds a little different when it also involves taking them to dinner. Kind of weird, but not necessarily nefarious. But then also taking them to Germantown just sounds pretty fascist. Like, it's smoke rather than fire, but it's very strange. So Sarfati elaborates. He says that Walter Breen was working for Sandia National Laboratories to do parapsychological research studies of New York City gifted children. He said, quote, there were experiments and they would just sit there with the kids, trying to get them to move objects. We never moved anything, but there was a whole program going on about this. And they talked about aliens and flying saucers, trying to figure out how they flew, and all of that stuff. It was a lot of science fiction, unquote. So here we have Jack Sarfati saying that this defense contractor, a specific company, was doing psychic research on New York City gifted children. Of course, Sarfati was one of these gifted children, and by all accounts, Epstein was also a New York City gifted child. It's just something to think about.
Yeah, and Epstein didn't go unnoticed as a gifted child because he was advanced through the public school system, at least. He wasn't pulled out of there, but who knows? And you said he was involved in this after-school group with this, right?
What's that?
You said he was involved in that after-school group. It was like a musical group or something.
Yeah, so Epstein was involved in a advanced competitive math club.
Right.
So he skipped 2 grades, was involved in a math club, was involved in music. It's not hard to imagine that he might have been caught on the radar of some of these people, especially considering that there was this program to find New York City gifted kids, and apparently sends them into certain avenues. Now,
yeah,
Epstein,
and I can tell you this,
took a different path.
Yeah, because my kid went through the debate, the forensic debate, national forensic debate, that the two parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, look to these kids and they see who's up and coming because they can groom these kids to be politicians later on in life. So there's people out there that do look that young for kids out there, gifted kids, that they could, pull aside and give them a kind of a pathway to success that they can also own and manipulate. Yeah.
And then especially when it reaches college, a lot of these, like the CIA, of course, recruits in college, things, et cetera. So Jack Sarfati says that Walter Breen arranged for him to attend Cornell on full scholarship, which he does do, and it starts his distinguished, if very weird career. And Sarfati says that he was not molested by Walter Breen, nor did he see any evidence of molesting going on. But Jack Sarfati's memoirs are full of very weird elliptical sentences where he seems to be implying things but will not say them. And in referring to Walter Breen in his memoir, he brings up a novel called, quote, The Child Buyer. And in this novel, it's the story of a defense company executive who tries to buy children of a certain sort with potentially critical value, unquote. And Sarfati does not elaborate on how that story relates to Walter Breen. He just leaves it in the air. So
let me ask you a quick question, because we're going to have to take a commercial break. Is Sarfati or Breen, are either of these two alive today?
Sarfati is alive. Walter Breen is dead.
Okay, has anybody confronted Sarfati with these questions?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, the people who interview him will ask him about certain things, but I mean, he had that interview where he basically says he was CIA, but
yeah, right.
So people have definitely asked him a lot about Breen, and a lot of these comments are coming from interviews with him. Yeah.
Okay, it's a good time to take a little commercial break. We're speaking today with Jimmy Falun Gong. You could find him on Twitter and follow all his Twitter activities. He's stumbled on this incredible string of events here involving the Sarfati and Mr. Walter Breen, all kind of, it was the head of NAMBLA. You can't go much further than that. NAMBLA is the North American Man-Boy Love Association. They advocate sex with children. You can't go get much more indictment than that. When you're an admitted pedophile, and you've been convicted in court, it can't go much further than that. Okay, but we'll be right back with more of this. He has a lot more connections he wants to present to us. We'll be right back with more of Jimmy Falun Gong after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors. If you find yourself in need of legal representation, it can be a very stressful time in your life. In my career, I have dealt with thousands of lawyers, I've dealt with thousands of law firms, and I can confidently recommend to you Keith M. Davidson at kmdlaw.com. Available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Just log into kmdlaw.com. That's kmdlaw.com. Or you can call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. That's 833-4KMD-LAW. Personal injury, wrongful death, STDs, sexual assault, car accidents. They handle it all efficiently and professionally. It doesn't matter how imposing the opposition may be, because the team at kmdlaw.com are battle-tested and fierce. They will not stop until justice prevails. Go to kmdlaw.com or call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. If you're in for the fight of your life, stop screwing around and contact KMD Law. The Opperman Report is brought to you by aquadam.net. You can give them a call at 707-764-2119. A flooded home is never easy to deal with. You're left with the mess to clean up, the insurance companies to deal with, and not to mention all the memories, the precious memories that are lost in the flood. You can never replace those. And Aquadam can be a tool in your arsenal to protect your home and property from the floodwaters. The cofferdam is filled with water to control water and is reusable as long as it's taken care of. It can protect your home or business from rising floodwaters like a dam, but without the beavers. It can also be used in construction. If you need an area to be dewatered, an Aquadam can do the job. An Aquadam was used at SeaWorld in Orlando for the Mako roller coaster ride during the coaster's construction by dewatering the work area. An Aquadam is now dewatering the work area at San Antonio SeaWorld for their newest roller coaster ride. An Aquadam has been used in many construction projects all around the U.S. and all around the world. Now give Aquadam a call, 707-764-2119. You can look them up online at aquadam.net. You can find them on Facebook at Aquadam Inc. You call them up, you email them, you tell them Ed Opperman sent you, and they're going to take 10% off the price. Aquadam.net, 707-764-2119. The Opperman Report is brought to you by aquadam.net. You can give them a call at 707-764-2119. A flooded home is never easy to deal with. You're left with the mess to clean up, the insurance companies to deal with, and not to mention all the memories, the precious memories that are lost in the flood. You can never replace those. An Aqua dam can be a tool in your arsenal to protect your home and property from the floodwaters. The cofferdam is filled with water to control water and is reusable as long as it's taken care of. It can protect your home or business from rising floodwaters like a dam, but without the beavers. It can also be used in construction. If you need an area to be dewatered, an Aqua dam can do the job. An Aqua dam was used at SeaWorld in Orlando for the Mako roller coaster ride during the coaster's construction by dewatering the work area. An Aqua dam is now dewatering the work area at San Antonio SeaWorld for their newest roller coaster ride. An Aqua dam has been used in many construction projects all around the U.S. and all around the world. Now give Aqua dam a call, 707-764-2119. You can look them up online at aquadam.net. You can find them on Facebook at Aquadam Inc. You call them up, you email them, you tell them Ed Opperman sent you, and they're going to take 10% off the price. Aquadam.net, 707-764-2119. If you find yourself in need of legal representation, it can be a very stressful time in your life. In my career, I have dealt with thousands of lawyers, I've dealt with thousands of law firms, and I can confidently recommend to you Keith M. Davidson at kmdlaw.com. Available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Just log into kmdlaw.com. That's kmdlaw.com. Or you can call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. That's 833-4KMD-LAW. Personal injury, wrongful death, STDs, sexual assault, car accidents. They handle it all efficiently and professionally. It doesn't matter how imposing the opposition may be, because the team at kmdlaw.com are battle-tested and fierce. They will not stop until justice prevails. Go to kmdlaw.com or call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. If you're in for the fight of your life, stop screwing around and contact KMD Law. Thank you so much for listening to the Opperman Report. I want to welcome all our new listeners at WWPR 1490 AM in the Tampa Bay area. We're brand new down here. We're getting a nice warm welcome. We have great advertising opportunities for local sponsors, local businesses, but also international websites and international companies too. We're on our other stations in California, Nevada, Utah, and on the internet worldwide. But down here in Tampa Bay, Florida, we have some great opportunities for you to come in and get very, very affordable advertising rates. Get a hold of me at oppermanreport@gmail.com and we'll cut you a good deal. Emailrevealer.com. People ask me all the time, hey Ed, are you still a private investigator? I sure am. Go to emailrevealer.com. We handle adoption investigations, infidelity investigations, where you give us your spouse's email address. We trace it back to online dating websites, catch them cheating online. Email tracing, locate or identify somebody from as little as an anonymous email address. Someone owe you money? Back child support? We can find that deadbeat, locate his hidden assets, locate his hidden bank accounts, find his current place of employment, and even assist you in obtaining a judgment and recover that judgment for you. Emailrevealer.com, digital forensics, computer forensics, cell phone forensics, recover deleted text messages, create a report that you can use in court. Emailrevealer.com, 800-572-9762.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. We are here today with Jimmy Falun Gong. That's his Twitter handle. You can find him on Twitter. They're a very prolific Twitterer. And he's come across this thread of information on Jeffrey Epstein and, who's this guy? Jack Sarfati? Jack Sarfati, yes. John H. Bowen, Whitley Strieber, and also, too, with this fellow Breen, who is a convicted, Walter Breen, who's a convicted pedophile. So, Mr. Falun Gong, where did we leave off? We're just getting into the I guess, Honeywell and Lockheed Martin and their involvement in all this.
Yeah, let's recap here. So, basically, looking at Sarfati and Epstein side by side, 14-year age difference, both in Brooklyn, both gifted children, both noticed to be gifted children, also with a music connection, with Epstein being a talented pianist, Jack Sarfati recruited by a child musical prodigy. The difference is that we know that Jack Sarfati was recruited into, quote, Merlin's Super Kids, which is an after-school study group run by a convicted pedophile. We do not know that for Epstein. But according to Sarfati, they were studied for psychic powers. There's no evidence Epstein was. But given his strange rise from this point on, it is fruitful to at least speculate because, as I'm sure all of your listeners know, Epstein was brought on to teach mathematics and physics at the Dalton School, despite not having graduated college or really having any other credentials. And of course, the headmaster at the time was Donald Barr of the OSS and father of former Attorney General William Barr.
Yeah, and William Barr, too, was part of Kirkland and Ellis before the Epstein case and after the Epstein case. Not during the case, but before and after the big trial down there in Palm Beach. Right. Real quick question for you. With Sarfati, has he ever mentioned being interested in massage or the benefits of massage?
You know, he's extremely new age. I did read over his memoir. He didn't say anything about massages. That is definitely interesting.
Yeah. Okay, Continue.
All right. So basically, Epstein at the Dalton School was put in a unique position to groom and assault elite children, not unlike Walter Breen, right? So Jack Sarfati is essentially the key to understanding that he and Epstein were probably part of an ongoing studies on New York City gifted children that also seemed to groom them sexually. And at least we could postulate that could happen. And it's strange credulity, honestly, that pedophiles keep being given elite access to gifted children by accident. That's the thing that seems to be a hard sell for me, that this keeps happening by accident. So to switch gears here, and I'm not going to go deep into the Finders cult, but I know that you have talked about the Finders cult. I'm sure that a lot of your audience probably knows the basics of the Finders cult case. Now, the thing that I want to bring to everyone's mind is, where were they taking those children, the ones that they found in the van? They were taking them to, quote, a school for very bright children in Mexico. Now, I want us to remember about a school for bright children in Mexico when we look at, real quick here, Lee Harvey Oswald. As your listeners probably know, Lee Harvey Oswald famously goes to Mexico in 1963 before the assassination, supposedly to get a visa to escape to Cuba. That's the story the Warren Commission reports. What a lot of people don't realize is the Warren Commission also documents Oswald taking a bus trip and speaking with a man called John Howard Bowen, who is all over FBI and CIA documents and memos. Even Hoover was sending memos with John Howard Bowen's name in them. Now, who's this guy real quick? According to Anthony Summers, a great researcher, basically this Bowen guy was a British Baptist preacher and devoted Nazi who ran a fascist boys camp in Tennessee. He lost his job after being accused of making sexual advances on young boys. The organization was known as the Campfire Council, and the camp was known as Boysville. Now, when the camp was shut down, the organization moved to Nebraska, and that organization opened Boys Town in Omaha. That's right. This is the same organization of Boys Town with the Franklin credit ring and, of course, the brief residence of Charlie Manson.
Right.
So what was Bowen's church sect? In the U.S., he referred to himself as Baptist, but he was also a minister of the Plymouth Brethren, which is the same sect that Aleister Crowley's parents belonged to. They were Christians, of course, and Crowley, of course, became a Satanist, etc. But it's a dead end. But basically, Jack Sarfati asserts in an interview, almost apropos of nothing, that Aleister Crowley and Ayn Rand have a connection, and he would not elaborate on the connection. Just something to think about. So, before the JFK assassination, John Bowen got on the Fed's radar in 1952 when two men took a private contract to assassinate a district judge in Texas. They accidentally killed the wrong person and were caught. And the Texas Assistant Attorney General received information from an unnamed conspirator thought to be Bowen that, quote, a unit of between 25 and 30 professional assassins are being kept in Mexico by the espionage section of the FBI. And it goes on to describe how these men were professional hitmen and did contracts all over the world.
Operation 40.
It's right.
Yeah, there's a picture of these guys sitting around. Yeah.
So that is who Lee Harvey Oswald was visiting in Mexico.
Oh, fascinating.
The guy who is supposedly running this school of assassins in Mexico, and this is in the Warren Commission. They don't draw the same conclusion, which is like, is Lee Harvey Oswald part of this? But they describe these things in the Warren Commission. So just real quick, in the words of Peter Levenda, quote, a Mexican school for assassination, the recruitment of young boys, Nazis, the Christian right, 1963. Just fuel for thought. And then one last tangent here. So we all probably know something about Operation Paperclip, but most people generally just think of NASA. They think Wernher von Braun, but it's less known that the U.S. scooped up three main groups of people, being the Nazi rocket scientists, the Nazi intelligence agency, known as the Gehlen Organization, and they also scooped up Nazi scientists that were doing human experimentation in concentration camps, those being the three most valuable groups of people. And where did they resettle the Nazi scientists doing human experimentation? They put them on Randolph Air Force Base, right there in San Antonio, Texas. And this is well documented in the New York Times. I was pulling up where they're talking about this. And of course, what they were doing is not well known. That's not public facing. But Randolph Air Force Base is in San Antonio, Texas, where Whitley Strieber grew up, right there in San Antonio, Texas. And Whitley Strieber, of course, author, famously wrote the book Communion. He sort of laid the groundwork for a lot of the abductee lore and mythos. But before his famous experiences that he wrote his book on, he actually describes later childhood visits to a secret school and he believed he was on a military compound. In communication with Peter Levenda, Whitley Strieber said he, quote, believed he may have been a victim of some sort of medical treatment or experimentation at the hands of these men. He further believed that some sort of connection existed between the Randolph Air Force Base and a school in Mexico, unquote. So, I know this is getting pretty far out there. This is
I actually
wild.
met Whitley Strieber. I met Whitley Strieber along with Art Bell at the same event, and very glassy eyes. Very glassy eyes. Like, remarkably, when you meet him, it's just his eyes are just totally glassed over. Like, yeah, that was my. And I don't think I've ever met anybody before or since. And I've met a lot of people. A lot of people out in the street and all kind of stuff. But extremely glassy eyes. They
call that the MK Ultra stare.
I guess,
mostly joking.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know what to make of this. This is just going off of what these people themselves are saying.
Right.
Like, and then basically to jump one final jump, basically, there's a noted psychotherapist and expert on hypnosis, Dr. Corydon Hammond, there in Utah, I believe. And he insists that a satanic cult exists in America that was begun by Nazi emigres after the war, and that this cult abuses and sacrifices children as part of its ritual.
Well, in the small world department, I'll tell you, I just emailed Dr. Corbin? Not even 3 days ago. Let me see if I can find it. And I contacted him about coming on the show, and he says, I have not. I said, thank you. But I must decline because, okay, I'll tell you what he says here. It's nothing private. Dr. Corden Hammond, no thank you. I haven't worked on these issues in almost 30 years, and that was it. But coincidence.
Interesting.
Coincidences do happen, right, Jimmy? So maybe half of the stuff you have here is a coincidence. It's possible, right?
Yeah. Basically, my thesis essentially is I suspect that all of these people are tied to an underlying phenomenon, which is that the CIA, the U.S. Army, brought Nazi scientists over, resettled them in Randolph Air Force Base, that they were doing human experimentation, perhaps on gifted children, that this somehow ties in with pedophilia, and there appears to be a satanic element. I'm not sure how it plugs in, but the underlying thing that I think I've found is that looking at Jack Sarfati gives a better context, perhaps, for what the trajectory Epstein got on, where he just one after another got plugged into one power structure after another, almost a meteoric rise to being a billionaire, his whole thing. My contention is that perhaps they were both seen, and of course they have different skill sets, so they were plugged into different places, but that's what I suspect, and that's the thrust of my thread, basically.
A couple of things. You talk about how everybody knows about Operation Paperclip, and these, but also too, Nazis brought in from Nazi Germany, also created the Food and Drug Administration too, as well. And I have that directly from someone whose father was directly involved in all that, firsthand. I have that from. So anyway, here we are. Another disturbing and miserable. And, so people say, well, this is so far-fetched. It's so mind-blowing. There are writings of Sigmund Freud, okay? He had a correspondence back and forth. You can Google this and find it. Where he says there seems to be a pattern of child ritual sexual abuse, and it seems to be organized and by a large organization. And this is going way back again. And he came out of Germany, didn't he? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this goes back,
Yeah, really, because growing up, the only people who'd ever talk about child ritual sexual abuse were crazy fundamentalist Christians. Yeah. But the more I've researched things, and initially I was only looking at the CIA, JFK stuff, the more I keep reading, the more it seems to be the case that there is a pattern here. And I don't have all the answers, but I can see a lot of weird connections is all I'm saying.
Yeah, I hear you too, and one thing that always stuck in my head, I was talking to Ted Gunderson once about all those old videos, and he said to me, he says, well, you got to understand, he goes, a lot of those videos, they were made in church basements, and we never in our life dreamed that they were going to wind up on the internet in front of 1 million people. We just never dreamed, so I don't even know what he meant by that, that they were exaggerating or what, or that they were saying things they weren't allowed to say. Because when you look at Ted Gunderson's life, the guy was COINTELPRO. This guy, it was California. Yeah. And he used to say to me, oh, yeah, we had to take down this Black Power movement, the black militants. We had to, oh, my God, we had to stop them. And
Gunderson for the longest time was the main source on all the Finder stuff, other than the customs report. So, I don't know what to make of that. Everything is so shadowy and weird, but when you research and find more, it does substantiate this stuff. So I don't know.
But also, too, it seems to be the more you delve into this, the less you really understand it. And it seems, and there's so much disinformation. Like before, we were talking about this guy who wrote the Kelly Blue Book on coins. And who sponsors all these right-wing crazy stations, these gold coins, invest in gold coins, buy these coins. And people, gullible people, they buy those stupid coins, they buy them for $240 a coin, and then when you go back to sell them, you only get $200 for them, or $180,
If you're lucky, yeah.
Yeah, because, no, we don't pay that much for them, And that's, I don't know, man. I don't know. Jimmy Fallon, Gong, keep in touch. Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry. We have a couple minutes.
Oh, no, I just wanted to give a shout out to the Subliminal Jihad podcast. Just real quick, my Twitter handle is @Falun Jimmy, which is FALUNJIMMY. Thank you.
Okay, great, man. Thank you so much, and keep in touch. If you have something new, we'll bring you right back on the air.
Thank you very much.
Good night. And now a word from our sponsors. Hey guys, if you like the show and you want to show your support, check out the Opperman Report Patreon. You can go there. We have for a $3 tier, you can go and you can hear all the shows that we produce for you Monday to Friday all over AM/FM radio around the country. You can hear those shows without the ads. We cut out all the advertising so you can listen to them ad-free. There's a $5 section where we take all the old shows from the members section and we upload them over there. Then we have a $10 section with 8 hours of brand new exclusive content each month. But there's also a ton of free content. I put up free content on Patreon all the time. I have those exclusive pictures of Jeffrey Epstein with the little girl in his lap. I got all kinds of court documents and stuff we put up all the time. Announcements, pictures, videos, all kinds of free content at the Opperman Report Patreon. So be sure to make that a one day. Hey guys, if you like the show and you want to show your support, check out the Opperman Report Patreon. You can go there and become a member for $3 a month. We have all the shows that you hear Monday through Friday on AM/FM radio. We have all those shows, but we cut out the ads, so you can hear that content ad-free. There's a $5 section where we put up all the old members section shows are going up over there. And then there's a $10 section where we have brand new content. 8 hours of exclusive content per month goes up there in the $10 section. But listen, I put up a lot of free stuff too. We put up documents, court documents, photographs, announcements. So you should make the Opperman Report Patreon a stop. You should stop there once a day and check out what's going on over there. That's Opperman Report Patreon. If you find yourself in need of legal representation, it can be a very stressful time in your life. In my career, I have dealt with thousands of lawyers, I've dealt with thousands of law firms, and I can confidently recommend to you Keith M. Davidson at kmdlaw.com. Available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Just log into kmdlaw.com. That's kmdlaw.com. Or you can call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. That's 833-4KMD-LAW. Personal injury, wrongful death, STDs, sexual assault, car accidents. They handle it all efficiently and professionally. It doesn't matter how imposing the opposition may be, because the team at kmdlaw.com are battle-tested and fierce. They will not stop until justice prevails. Go to kmdlaw.com or call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. If you're in for the fight of your life, stop screwing around and contact KMD Law. The Opperman Report is brought to you by aquadam.net. You can give them a call at 707-764-2119. A flooded home is never easy to deal with. You're left with the mess to clean up, the insurance companies to deal with, and not to mention all the memories, the precious memories that are lost in the flood. You can never replace those. And Aquadam can be a tool in your arsenal to protect your home and property from the floodwaters. The cofferdam is filled with water to control water and is reusable as long as it's taken care of. It can protect your home or business from rising floodwaters like a dam, but without the beavers. It can also be used in construction. If you need an area to be dewatered, an Aquadam can do the job. An Aquadam was used at SeaWorld in Orlando for the Mako roller coaster ride during the coaster's construction by dewatering the work area. An Aquadam is now dewatering the work area at San Antonio SeaWorld for their newest roller coaster ride. An Aquadam has been used in many construction projects all around the U.S. and all around the world. Now give Aquadam a call, 707-764-2119. You can look them up online at aquadam.net. You can find them on Facebook at Aquadam Inc. You call them up, you email them, you tell them Ed Opperman sent you, and they're going to take 10% off the price. Aquadam.net, 707-764-2119.